All right.
Hard
Something maybe a little easier to grapple than Merleau-Ponty, but still challenging, I think, especially the Garfinkel, although this is among his easier pieces. Frequently, the practices that ethnomethodologists seek to identify and describe are non-discursive. And that's what makes, that is, they're not revealed in their full form at the discursive level. And that's because people are probably doing more than they are knowing. And of course, the bulk of social psychology is dealt with just the knowing part. So it's really interesting for us to be doing what we're doing. Carl Mannheim tells us that phenomenological analysis can provide access to that kind of atheoretical experience. And he demonstrates this in his, what he calls, his sociology of knowledge. That's probably why interviews are not so helpful. You sit down and you interview people and you realize you didn't really get much. And Garfinkel on page 37 says in the second line, when we ask him about them, he has little or nothing to say. That is what maybe is most important, especially to us, and maybe even most important to them, but they're not even aware of it. They don't know is happening. So how do you make that visible? How do you study that? For these background experiences to come into view, Garfinkel tells us, one must become estranged from them. Now, the classical way of becoming estranged was Husserl's bracketing, the phenomenological reduction. That is, what Husserl's method was, whatever you think, you don't worry about whether it's right or wrong. You just bracket it and look at the how it got constructed. So it's to give you perspective, like a step back. So you see yourself thinking. You're not just thinking, you're thinking, or not just looking, you're looking at yourself looking. So that phenomenological reduction is very helpful. And that's part of the estrangement. Other ways of becoming estranged is to be an anthropologist and go put yourself in a place where all the taken for granted notions are weird. And so then they become noticeable. Okay, that's one way to do it. Another way to do it. There are other ways, but you'll have to ask me after class. Here Garfinkel said, Garfinkel's solution then was to do the breaching experiments, which seems to have caught on among the students here at Southern Denmark University from the looks of what I've been reading. That is, he says on the bottom of page 37, 4 lines from the bottom, procedurally, it is my preference to start with familiar scenes and ask what can be done to make trouble. Okay. So I was thinking you might want to consider, where is it that the forklift operators are being the most creative? Where do they get into trouble? Where do they pause? Where do they... You can probably see on your tape when they are puzzled. They will display some puzzlement. And I'd hone in on those situations because that's when they would do their most typical original thinking. Anyway, the objective is to capture the seen but unnoticed backgrounds of everyday activities. And that's in just above the middle of the page. And if we continue with that, there's a bit of sarcasm there that I want to celebrate. The seen but unnoticed backgrounds of everyday activities are made visible and are described from a perspective in which people live out the lives they do, have the children they do, feel the feelings, think the thoughts, enter the relationships they do, all in order to permit the sociologist to solve his theoretical problems. I mean, my students read that and they don't know if they're supposed to laugh or what is he serious like, and they're almost willing to buy into it. Right? That's the scary part. but I mean, but it's not far off from the attitude that sociologists have. They are so remote. I mean, I worked in the #1 social psychology lab in America for a year, and it was big bucks. I mean, they were getting so much government money, and not only that, next door there was a huge survey research center. They were getting even more governmental money. And when I said, "Don't you think you should figure out what these answers mean for the people in the situations that they're in?" And they said, no, we don't want to get too involved. We're professionals, right? I said, well, I won't go on with that story. But, I mean, Garfinkel's sarcasm comes from a very good place, okay? A very appropriate place, although that's what got him somewhat expelled from the sociology establishment, and it's what made it hard for all of the students to get jobs. Because you know how it is in departments. What's the first thing people ask when they hire somebody? It's the same thing people ask in deciding who's going to be the next chair. How is it possible that this person could cause me trouble, right? And if they can cause you trouble, even in your imagination, you don't hire them, right? I mean, and so Harold caused so much trouble that that people were afraid to hire. I remember when I got this job, one of the top sociologists in America, wonderful human being, said to me, "Look, I'm really happy to have you, and you can critique us all you want so long as it's constructive, but don't cause problems." He said, "You got to promise me you won't just rag on us, right?" And I said, no, don't worry, but anyway, that's the sarcasm. On 38, there's an even more interesting formulation. At the top line, he says that his effort, his strategy, is to look for moments when parties sustain bewilderment, consternation, and confusion, right? And I know that was the case. Anything that he could find where people got stuck, any aporia, we would say, any spot where people could no longer make sense of things. He loved that in the inverting lenses where people started walking into walls. How do they make sense so that they wouldn't keep slamming into the wall? Or how do they make sense of these maps that have them completely lost in the worst part of town? He loved seeing how people struggled, because that's when he saw how people organized the world in not just discursive ways, but in non-discursive ways. And in that degree, he was very influenced by Gurvitch. I had an exchange with Rod Watson where we agree on most things, but one thing he disagrees is that Harold was seriously influenced by Gurvitch, because it's not in Harold's writings. It is toward the end, finally, but it was in his seminars, it was in his thinking. I mean, the field of consciousness, the phenomenal field arguments, the Gestalt contexture arguments, all come from Gurvitch, because these were non-discursive inquiries. Schutz was mostly discursive. Watson is a great name for Schutz, cognitivist, right? Which I think is fair. And Schutz gave us so much, it's hard to be critical, but we have to be critical if we're going to take the next step. Okay, so let's look at the Mannheim, and then we'll come back to the Garfinkel. Mannheim argues that studying and understanding non-conceptual and non-objective phenomena is the project of most cultural and historical disciplines. And so he's looking to justify his own enterprise. He observes on page 33, his 33, that, that's the first page, that many things are given of which no clear theoretical account can be rendered. Now, the phenomenologists, starting with Husserl, always talk about what is given, what is given. That goes back to that definition of phenomenology as the way things present themselves from themselves in themselves that we got from Heidegger. That is, our first job, what Husserl calls evidence, is to just see what you're seeing. Just frankly fess up to whatever is given in the way it's given to you. You can get theoretical after, but at least make contact with something that substantial to start off with. And so that given is very important. So he says a lot of things are given and then incorporated into the work, the mundane work, that are not necessarily theoretical. And I felt that would be important for the work you guys are doing. He asks, is there any way to transpose it into scientific and theoretical terms? You have to write about it. How do you take the non-discursive, and that's your job really, and turn it into discursive, first in a productive way, and second without distorting it? Can such a given ever, he asks, become an object of valid, verifiable scientific knowledge? And so what is rigorous knowledge in that context? On the top of 34, that first sentence of the next section, he asks, is it possible to determine the global outlook of an epoch in an objective scientific fashion? That is, this global outlook is the Weltanschauung, the worldview, and it's very important to study worldviews if you're going to understand if you're going to understand the Bible. You need to look at where the people that wrote the Bible were coming from. Maybe it's not 100% applicable to you, but at least you place their ideas. You can understand their ideas best when you know the context from which they came. And you're going to do that anyway. It's not like you can read anything without imagining what that worldview would be. My student, I don't know if I mentioned here, one of my best students, he's an absolutely brilliant guy, has lived in Denmark for a year and did this study of atheism in Denmark and wrote a book called A Country Without God that's been translated into 7 languages. And Penguin is doing the reprint on the English. And, he has to come to grips better than he's done so far. He does a synchronic study. What is the thinking of Danish people now, today? And how do they sustain their atheism while they're continually going to these confirmations and marriages and all these things? And it's very interesting. I've been talking. When I ask them, well, what exactly are they confirming if no one believes in God? They don't even understand the question. It seems like a foolish question or an impertinent or a question that's just not pertinent.
It's a family ritual.
Yeah. So it's very interesting, but surely this orientation didn't just happen recently, and it's not. There's some background, some historical experience that you could interrogate, and it might be worthwhile because it might inform you more deeply as to how they're organizing their knowledge today. And anyway, this is a project of historical research. And about that, Mannheim asks, not just what is it, but in this essay he's asking, how is this kind of knowledge given to the historian? How do you deal with it? And that's really a pretty early posing of this how that Garfinkel has made so much of. Of course, Husserl also had his how, but this how is really interesting. And he knew, it's interesting because Mannheim appreciated how foolish it is to turn that how into a discursive conceptual question, or discursive conceptual answer. And so he writes back on 33, it is not our intention to propose a substantive definition of Weltanschauung based upon definite philosophical premises. Now, at the time Mannheim was writing, I don't know when this was written, probably 30s, 40s, and it's pretty rare not to define your terms in discrete ways. But in fact, he's saying, look, the definition isn't going to help us.
You say 23 down here?
23, is that what it is?
In the first page.
Well then that's what it is. Yeah, I guess this was an early one.
Which is quite early.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's pretty saying, I'm not going to even define Weltanschauung, right? And I remember Harold saying many times, don't ask me to define these things, don't even rely on the words, right? You can't get there with understanding the words. You can't understand it without the words, but it's not the word definitions that are going to win the day here. His point of inauguration, as well as surely Husserl, but is Dilthey, which was also the other influence upon Heidegger. And he cites Dilthey saying that Weltanschauungen are not produced by thinking. So here we have an objective phenomenon, something in the world of Weltanschauung, but it's more than the words and meanings that help to compose it. Theoretical philosophy is neither the creator nor the principal vehicle of the Weltanschauung of an epoch. He says on page 38, quote, I think at the very top, no, in the middle, more than that. If this totality we call Weltanschauung is understood in this sense to be something atheoretical, and at the same time to be the foundation of all cultural objectifications such as religion, mores, art, and philosophy. And then he goes on, and we're going to have to find a way to study it, even if the more tangible, concrete ways of doing scientific research are not applicable. On 40, he says that the theoretical categories are inadequate and distort the authenticity of direct experience. Not only are they inadequate, but they're going to do damage. And of course, Garfinkel talks about that in his reduction theory, that the way we reduce things into theoretical sociological knowledge makes it impossible for us to recover any of that direct experience. The Weltanschauung of an epoch is not amenable to the kind of splice, dice, and numerate that we discussed last time, which is the hallmark of scientific praxis. He says on 37, he speaks of various strata, about 6 lines above that section 3. Various strata differentiated by abstraction. And I think I gave the example of how the rotting log is artificially just divided into 9 ages, 9 stages of growth, and then you categorize what grows at each stage. And so the definitions of those stages really is reflexive in that what grows, what you describe, the notes you take at that stage become the meaning of that stage, and then you essentialize them as though they're different things. But you have to have that division in order to have something small enough that you can count. There are so many of this mushroom at stage 3, and then at stage 4 you have 5 times as many, and then by stage 5 they're all gone, right? I mean, so this splice, dice, and numerate is not appropriate to our problem here, okay? He says on 34 that the praxis employed successfully in the natural sciences is inappropriate for some fields in the human sciences. And then he says on 35, very interestingly, such as everyday experience, in the dead middle of the page. I mean, this might be the first time I've read about everyday experience in it by a sociologist. I mean, it certainly, he anticipates ethnomethodology by a generation. This emerging set of questions, he writes on 37 as the first complete paragraph, cannot be treated on its merits unless one is ready to emancipate oneself from the methodological principles of natural science. I can't suggest that to my collaborators in coffee states. That would be anathema to talk about emancipation from natural science. For in the natural sciences, where problems of this kind are necessarily lacking, we encounter nothing even faintly analogous to the thought patterns with which we have to deal at every step in the cultural sciences. It's very interesting. Typically, what happens in terms of university funding for coffee phenomena, you get a lot of funding for studying diseases, because that is a practical benefit, and it's appropriate for natural scientific research to analyze that. But then you get also the coffee tasting studies, and when you get that, you get the most objectivist form of tasting. And in my fieldwork, I found both successful objective forms and successful non-objective forms. But there's some point at which all these institutes that are fairly well funded, there's one in Texas, there's now one in California, they're really interested to have somebody like me come along, because they know that the kind of phenomenon they're looking at when they're looking at taste regimes is a cultural phenomenon that isn't fully analyzable according to the methods that reflect their best expertise. So they're actually quite ecumenical as far as that goes, except you're like, I don't know, you're like tolerated rather than celebrated. But it's I think interesting the way Mannheim formulates the problems. He says that we have to place everyday phenomenon into our descriptive forms, and we have to have a methodology appropriate for doing that. At the bottom of page 39, about 11 lines from the bottom, the paradoxical nature of theoretical thought, distinguishing it from the other forms, consists in this, that it seeks to superimpose a logical theoretical pattern upon experiences already patterned under other, for example, aesthetic or religious categories. So this is the cognitivism that I mentioned is Rod Watson's complaint about even theoretical social scientists. And I think what you folks are doing here is very much the right idea. I mean, you're looking at things that demand non-discursive. They're non-discursive phenomena that demand non-discursive inquiries, and I'm really excited about the prospects that this holds for the future development of ethnomethodology, which has taken a bit of a cognitivist turn even in my own work. There's we don't want to just do concepts. We want to keep more broad, and I think that need was recognized early on, as we see here in Mannheim. So we need to try to avoid theorizing our way through our data, or what Garfinkel used to call detailing generalities. Right? We have our generality. This is how not every, but most graduate students do their work, right? I mean, they start out this way. They've got their categories, their thesis, and then they just go out and collect, whatever illustrations make their thesis come true, right? I mean, it's a no-lose enterprise, and it's theoretically driven rather than recognizing that the forms are sui generis. You know, they are autochthonous. It was Gurvich's term that Garfinkel picked up. They're self-organizing. And you can't be studying forklift operators without, I mean, you don't know anything about it, so you have to just let them show you what they're doing. And I mean, I suppose they're talking at some stage, but the nonverbal stuff has to be pretty thick. So this, when you observe how affairs are self-organizing, you preserve the natural texture of the situation in its depth, and do not, as he says, the second line from the bottom on 39, without violating their individual character, okay, in the way that a simplistic practice of superimposing theoretical interpretations can do. Okay, on 43, Mannheim asks, toward the top, whether, the first question accordingly pertains to the phenomenology of the intentional object. And all it asks is whether Weltanschauung is a possible object at all, whether in fact it is given at all, and in how far the way in which it is given differs from that in which other objects are given to us. So he's as the earlier given, he's doing a fairly classical phenomenological question, trying to stay fresh, trying to stay connected with the phenomenon, and trying to keep his theorizing out of it until a very late stage. And it's here that we find the first use of the word documentation. That is, he has this typology of 3 levels of meaning. And I want to go over them. The first is objective meaning, and the second is expressive meaning, and the third is documentary meaning. I'm not even sure that's the best term. I don't know how he came upon it, and I wanted to ask Josef if is there anything in the German word for documentary that has more resources than it has in English. Yeah.
I have to look if Mannheim actually uses documentary, but I guess he did. The German word for it, I don't know, I haven't seen a German original.
Yeah. And of course, interpretation is also a problem, and because it already gets us into thinking it's a conceptual thing when it's not. That's Rod Watson's complaint also. He thinks documentary interpretation is so broad and so important, but it's important not because of the conceptual stuff it does, and the interpretation part steers people in the wrong direction. Okay, and the documentary makes it seem more concrete and objective than maybe it is. Anyway, the 3 levels of meaning. The objective meaning is that, for example, a natural object can be cognized without being transcended. It can be just grasped. A tree, a river. A cultural object, such as a marble statue's physical properties, the character of the marble, has an objective meaning. And even something like how artists treat space can be described without referring to the artist's consciousness. You can see in a particular, the way space is used in Chinese painting is different than the way space is used in Bruegel, or Bruegel, I don't know how he would pronounce that. And that's objective. A good deal of the anthropology that I've read of Australian Aboriginal people is objective. Like there's long tomes on how they do their scarring, their citricacies, how they scar the shoulders and the front and the back, and I mean just measurements and details and drawings, and I know more than I ever needed to know about this phenomenon. And it's subjective for a very good reason. They haven't a clue what it means for Aboriginal people. You can read 14 ethnographies, and the anthropologist who writes as if he was never there, and I use he because it was always men, really probably wasn't there because they didn't seem to learn anything about the subjective life of the people they were describing. But in any case, describing these objective forms can be done in that subjective meaning. Just understanding what Aboriginal people think about these citricacies, that would be subjective meaning. That would be expressive meaning. A social object, the objective meaning as displayed by the act, like the bells ringing in the church, signaling that the marriage has been consecrated, right? I mean, I guess you can say there's joy in the bells, but it's an objective thing. Or he uses his friend who gives alms. That you can say he gave alms, that's an objective fact. What it meant to give alms, whether it was with disdain for the person he was giving alms to, reluctance, or heartfelt compassion, that would be the expressive meaning. And I like to think that objective meaning is a bit like early medieval art. You know, I mean, there's just the forms on the page, and it's hard to know what anybody there is feeling about a situation. Expressive meaning, then, the second meaning, is the subjective experience of the artist, of a composer, of a sculptor. It is meaning as subjectively intended. He says on page 50, and I can just read it to you, in interpreting expressive meaning, including that embodied in a representational content, we must seek to grasp what the artist actually intended. Hence, close familiarity with the attitudes and idiosyncrasies of an epic or an individual artist is needed. You're trying to figure out what's going on in the experience of the artist. So you're not just looking at the stone of the marble statue or describing the character of the marble, but you're talking about the beauty of the marble statue. That's more of a subjective thing. Or you talk about the reasons his friend gave alms. And I like to think of that as more like Renaissance art, where you have this incredible subjectivity in all these portraits. I remember when I went to the Uffizi for the first time, I just came out absolutely stunned at how egoistic these Renaissance people were. Everybody was a big shot, right? I mean, you wouldn't have had art. Maybe art would still be in the medieval period if it weren't for all these big egos. I mean, there was individualism, and there's a movement from the medieval to the Renaissance where you could see individualism at work. And that very question, that very analysis is part of the Weltanschauung orientation that Mannheim is moving us toward. So the documentary meaning, the final one, he says very importantly, is something that points beyond the alms and also beyond the subjective understanding to something that maybe the person wasn't even aware of. You know, maybe everybody's cynical, you know, when they give, or super compassionate when they give. It's in the air or in the food or the water. This something different, he tells us, is no longer an intentional content entertained by my friend or the intentional object of an artist. He may not even be aware of it. But the friend's essential character, as evidenced by his actions and revealed to be in ethical terms, a hypocritical one, as along with my synoptical appraisal of his personality of a whole, is the documentary meaning. Now, again, documentary is an odd name for it, but what it is the person does something and it appears strange, and you think about it, and he does something else, and you go, there it goes again, and then you say, oh, well, he's just like that. And that ideal type, he's just like that that character, that essential nature or ethos of the subject, in Mannheim's words, is something that's not there. It's something in our imagination, and yet that's what makes those individual documents in that file, you can say, understandable. We're using something outside the experience. In the terms of last week, we're using something invisible to explain something that's visible. So, it's really important to this is what grasped Garfinkel's imagination, because this is where people were getting the core of the sense that they were making.
Could I ask a question?
Please.
There's one thing here that I can't quite grasp. It's the notion of the phenomenological reduction, right? You go into a situation where, well, certainly Schutz advocates that you can kind of turn off, you can bracket.
Yeah.
But now what you're saying is that part of this process is looking beyond the situation, trying to grasp something else out of it that is not maybe apparent to the people involved.
Well,
Are you not then stepping out of this so-called bracketing?
yes, I mean, because he's interested in bracketing if he's going to be doing phenomenological description. But if he's going to be doing historical analysis, that's a different question. And the data is
But if we just take the beggar, the person giving alms, right, and then
Yeah.
you start making, because as far as I understand, if you're
Yeah.
bracketing, you're observing what's going on.
Yeah.
But then if you start pulling out the documentary notion of what this is about, you're stepping outside of, you're beginning to make assumptions basically, which are not necessarily, they're related to what you think, but not what the situation is.
If your concern is that we're on a slippery slope, that's for sure.
Actually, I have no problem with it.
Yeah.
The problem I have is the notion of bracketing.
Yeah.
I said it at the seminar.
Oh, okay, I get you.
Is that it's, I mean, Gadamer says
You're
this,
very
you can't go
consistent.
into a situation without having some kind of prejudice.
Yeah.
So as I understand it,
Yeah.
so it's...
No, but you can neutralize your prejudice long enough to take a closer look.
Okay, fine. I mean, I find it's very sympathetic. It's not that I'm critical of it.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to understand what the essential difference is here between...
But you know, I think back of I remember at the dinner table when I was a kid, I used to love hearing my father talk about all of his business associates. When he'd come in, he just let it loose for a half hour over dinner, right? And very frequently, it was, this guy's just an asshole, right? This guy's just bad. That was the most famous. He's just bad. And, you know, I was too young to know or even have an opinion. I was just curious as to, you know, what was this phenomenon of being bad? And how did people get to be bad? And, you know, what made them that way? And where did it come from? And how was it sustained? These were my questions, right? And then I noticed, you know, a week or two later, he'd come back and say, oh, he's not so bad after all, right? And in each case, he's trying to explain the behavior of the person by coming up with some explanation about his fundamental character, and then using that to explain what was going on, not realizing that he was projecting everything, whether it's good or bad, you know, and then essentializing it. The problem here is the essentialism. Mm. But what fascinates me is, well, I mean, let me read what I was going to say next and make this big point. Documentary evidence, Mannheim tells us, will not be sought within one single work. We rather have to range over all comparative realizations of the same problem, right? It's not a matter of simple addition. You know, the character of a classical Chianti wine or of an Ethiopian Sidamo. Oh, this is it. This is what the flavor is. I mean, that's an ideal type that's not there in the wine, but still, yeah. You know, it's something tangible. But oftentimes, and I think this is the most amazing thing that that Mannheim says, and it's what gets Garfinkel all excited. You don't have to range, I mean, as a scientist, he's saying you need to range over all comparable realizations, right? Comparative work. But in fact, that's not how it works. He says, the peculiar thing, this is in the middle of page 57, let's find it so you can underline it. It's just above the middle. The peculiar thing is, in fact, that in a certain sense, one single item of documentary evidence gives a complete characterization of the subject. This is what I just think is the greatest, right? You only need to drink 1 cup of Ethiopian Sidamo, and all of a sudden you get it, right? You really understand this general category that ennobles the instance. So what you're presenting is just an instance of a type. But the type only exists in your imagination and you don't realize it. You know, I mean, I'm here in Denmark. I've been here long enough to now be able to explain that Danish people are like this, right? But I'm probably wrong more than I'm right. But anyway, I'm using that to make sensible the way they do things, right? Because I find there's some idiosyncrasies going on that require explanation. And it's so amazing that we don't have to have tons of things. We can just have one and we'll get there, right? And very quickly, if you look at talk that people do, everyone will be an expert after one round of talk, right? It's amazing.
I think there is an analogy here that is quite interesting that has attracted me. If you look at the development in natural science, in the complexity and chaos theory, you see the nature of the fractal, where in the fractal you can see the same as you can see, or some of the same as you can see in a larger scale. So they have found a way to talk about something that is similar.
Yeah,
somehow.
That's right. That's interesting.
We have. I mean, I think of the design process because often user-oriented design process often criticized as there are just not enough people. How if you just work with 5 people, you know that it's basically representative of maybe thousands.
Yeah.
And of course, it's actually we're very bad at coming up with good arguments as to why that is the case. And this is but I remember when Trina started working with us, the fact that you could take 15 seconds of CA analysis, and that was enough to understand a far bigger setup. And it really took me a while to get my head around that, you know. But it's
well, there were a lot of battles in the early days with Ethno and CA with their colleagues who said, that's not a sample we're even gonna listen to. It's one case, and it's your wife to boot. You know, that's not science. You know. But anyway, further down to 57, if you jump about 12, 13 lines, this search for documentary meaning for an identical homologous pattern underlying a vast variety of totally different realizations of meaning belongs to a class apart that should not be confused with either addition or synthesis or the mere abstraction of a common property shared by a number of objects. So that you can't get at the ideal type, a classic Chianti, through this scientific process. Rather, there's a different kind of process, a hermeneutic, or I don't know, or he's saying a documentary process, although I'm not sure that's the best word. What's extraordinary is that the how of people making sense proceeds in case after case by people using what's not there to make intelligible what is there. And coffee tasters do this all the time. They'll taste the coffee and they'll say, this is delicious, but this scares me. And so I'm going to give this a low score. even though it's the best tasting coffee on the table. Well, you're the one arguing objectivity. Why are you giving it a low score? Because I think it's too scary. I could not recommend that my boss invest money in this because it tastes good because there's some kind of peculiar fermentation going on, and it's probably only going on last year. There's no guarantee it'll go on next year. And they'll start using these beans in their coffee, and their customers will expect this flavor, and they won't be able to get it next year. And they will not only not be able to produce what customers expect, but they'll spend a lot of money undermining their reputation. Okay, so you know all that just from what you're tasting? And they do, because what's not there is making intelligible what is there. Remember last week Merleau-Ponty said that the total visible is always behind or after or between the aspects that we see of it. That is to say, there's no visible without some invisible. And that invisible is at work all the time. So Mannheim was describing historical science, or rather the hermeneutic science of historical analysis. Garfinkel read this and discovered something idiosyncratic in it and pulled it out and turned it into something of his own. As idiosyncratic as it is, it's still pretty universal. Do we want to take a short break now before we take up Garfinkel? Okay.
I wonder, in a way, you have this non-discursive phenomenon, and then you have the discursive version of it. And in classical psychological thinking, the aim is to get from the non-discursive to the discursive. And as I understand now in phenomenology, in a way, it accepts the non-discursiveness and doesn't want to. It is always there, so it will not. You cannot take it away somehow. But on the other hand, if you talk about your coffee tasters, you say in the moment they nail it down, then it's not interesting. On the other hand, that's what they do, they nail it down.
Well, I'm not saying it's not interesting, it's that the most original part of the process concludes.
Okay, okay.
But you said it yourself. You said Garfield loved to see where people were struggling.
Yeah.
And coffee tasting is like a sort of artificial struggle, really.
Yeah.
It's the chaos. That's what designers love.
Isn't it the kind of recognition that now I have given it the kind of wording, and I know how imperfect it is compared to the experience as such.
Yeah.
I think that's the kind of
Because nailing it down with words can be the same thing as feeling it. You know, you can never
Sensing
nail
it.
it.
Well, there's sometimes, there's probably three responses. Sometimes they nail it down and feel really great. They've really got it perfect, right? But that doesn't mean that it doesn't close the creative process. Sometimes they'll nail it down and feel dissatisfaction. They don't quite have it right, just like a poet who hasn't found the right word. Sometimes there'll be that, I forget exactly what that third one was. I mean, sometimes they'll just be wrong, I guess.
But it's still not like in some psychological Vygotskian thinking or so, in a way, the non-discursive thing is raw and in a way organic, but not really worthwhile, and the real thing is to put in words. This is in a way not the stance which is taken by Mannheim. He says all three things are there all the time. Or all the
Right, and
So-
they are all there all the time.
Yeah, but
And-
it doesn't go away, but put the words in.
Right.
Which is very different from a lot of other things.
Yeah, he's not rejecting any of the others, he's just saying this one shouldn't be rejected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But what I miss it in it, and we were briefly mentioning in the conversation with Chris about it, is this kind of how you avoid the discursiveness you will go into it with, that you can not have a kind of opinion, not have a
Right.
history, not have a past,
Right.
that you can look at. You cannot
Yeah.
look at it
Yeah.
from the kind of
Objectively.
The best you
Yeah.
can do is to be aware.
yes.
Yeah,
So,
precisely.
That you've got
so
it.
that's why the reflexivity is so damn important about
Yeah.
what you think you know, what you have
Yeah.
to reflect about
Yeah.
your own
Yeah.
ideology somehow, the
Yeah.
most you can about. And I think that's a kind of ongoing process in trying to look at what you're seeing is. So how much does this say about me instead of about what I'm looking at?
You know, I've been considering this in connection with another talk I'm giving later this week on the connections between Buddhist epistemology and phenomenology and ethnomethodology. And, you know, the Tibetans have this incredible analysis of the emptiness of inherent existence. And they'll get a good insight, but their insight will be the like the opposite of the Midas touch. It'll contaminate everything. I mean, as soon as they have that insight, as soon as they put it into a formal philosophical formulation, as they're obliged to do, they'll lose it. They'll contaminate it. And they have these incredible debates where they try to avoid doing that. And it's not possible.
That's where the Zen Buddhist koan comes from. What's the sound of one hand clapping?
Well, I have another theory.
Well,
where
yeah,
it came
but,
from.
I mean, just the point is you
Yeah.
don't give an answer.
Right, right.
Or if you do
right.
give an answer,
Yeah.
you say the geese are flying in the sky, right? That's a good answer.
No.
Yeah, but I mean,
No. That-
No,
you're
wrong-
you're
wrong
conflating
season.
two different koans.
oh, I know I am, but I'm just.
The koan about the geese is, the student looks up and tells his master, look at the geese. I wonder where they're going. And the master says, not going, not coming. That is, are they going or are they coming? I mean, it's all, your perspective is the going or the coming.
Mm.
And you're projecting that onto the geese as to they're doing some going, but how do you know they're not doing some coming? So, I mean, that's the geese con anyway. Sorry. My theory on Zen koans is they're not Buddhist at all, they're Taoist. And the Chinese interjected that into Buddhism before Buddhism got from India to Japan. That's my thesis. Anyway. It doesn't mean they're wrong. I mean, Taoism's terrific, you know. But their objectives are less logical. The Tibetans' objectives are more formological, which is why I'm so interested in the dilemmas that they have. Okay, back to Garfinkel. So he pulls out this notion of the documentary meaning. And he especially pulls out these words of a document of, these words as pointing to something that stands outside of. And if we look in Garfinkel on page 40, we'll find it there. Maybe the bottom of 39 even. No? Well, yeah, we can start at bottom 10. Matters that the two stood in common were understood only in and through a course of understanding work that consisted of treating an actual linguistic event as this understanding work, that is the work of understanding is what's being studied, that consisted of treating an actual linguistic event as the document of, as pointing to, as standing on behalf of an underlying pattern of matters that each already supposed to be the matters that the person, by speaking, could be telling the other about. The underlying pattern was not only derived from a course of individual documentary evidences, but the documentary evidences were in their turn were interpreted on the basis of what was known. So, and then you get this fabulous passage. Each was used to elaborate the other. This is positively huge. That is, it's the first articulation, and it comes twice. This is the articulation on page 40. If you turn to 78, you'll see that it's repeated. I think it's about the only time that I'm aware of that something's repeated this way in this book. You find in the middle of the page, according to Mannheim, the documentary method involves the search for the identical homologous pattern underlying a vast variety of totally different realizations of meaning, and then you get this repetition. The method consists of the document of pointing towards, and each is used to elaborate the other. I mean, that's really, really interesting. And I wonder, Garfinkel used this to describe how rules operate in a game. You read the rules, you don't know what they mean. You can't know what they mean because they only mean what they mean in the play of the game. But you can't play the game without the rules because you don't know what to do. You don't even know who goes first. So the rules lead you into the play that end up defining the rules. The rules elaborate the play, and the play elaborates the rules. That's the reflexivity of the situation. Each elaborates the other, and that's the point of accounts. Any account elaborates the situation that it's describing or the situation that it's attempting to make orderly. But the situation itself tells you what the account is. Even the person who develops the account doesn't know what the meaning of the account is. It's only the situation that's going to provide that meaning. And each is used to elaborate the other. And you get another very interesting use of that in Larry Weider's telling the convict code, how they tell the code. That the code, the rules that the convicts have are very unformulaic. I mean, they exist and they can tell you what they are, but they mean different things every day, and they're continually expanding. And the situations and the rules each elaborate the other. And as I described last time also about the relationship between the marks on a sketch map and the landscape. You can't find the landscape without the marks, but the landscape tells you what the marks mean. Okay? So this is a very important passage here. Now, if you notice, just above that line used to elaborate the other is what is known, and the what is known is in quotation marks. What do you think these quotation marks are doing? Why do you need quotation marks around what is known?
Well, is it because it's doubtful? You'll never completely know.
No, I think you had it right.
It has a bracketing effect in my reading, anyways.
Yeah.
Shows that
It's like you're seeing them in brackets.
Yeah.
In fact, in Garfinkel's later work, he had a whole decade in which every notion he came up with he put in brackets, because he didn't want to delude himself that he knew what he was talking about, because he knew he was only going to know what he was talking about when the world told him what it was. Like I have this first chapter of my book on the local orderliness of crossing Kincaid, and I have these categories of doing oblivious and being oblivious, that there's a difference. People crossing the street, some of them are really oblivious. I mean, they're off in their cell phone, and the car can see that they're going to be a grease spot on a highway if the car doesn't put on the brakes. Whereas there's other people who cross and just pretend to be oblivious, right? They know it's an effective strategy, and that's a completely different phenomena. And I have these things in brackets because I'm still learning more about what they consist of. Okay, so this what is known, yeah, maybe there is some cynicism if it's real knowledge, but it's real knowledge enough. It's to keep it open. And in Italian, how do you say put quotation marks around something?
So to remind himself and also to know.
Tra virgolette, esatto. And I want to show you a tape with that. Yeah, well, what was your question?
More kind of, so he used the brackets to remind the reader and to remind himself that we shouldn't take concepts like what we know as something granted somehow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and also, in this case, it's hard to know whether it's also for them as well as for us.
Mm.
But in any case, what is known is seen to be a production phenomenon,
Yeah.
rather than, you know, absolute truth. Right. Okay. This is a very short passage. He says molto leggero, tra virgolette. That is very light. Molto, very leggero is light, and tra virgolette. Now, why would somebody say that the coffee's light in quotation marks? What is the local work that allows the person to do? It's like saying that, well, you know, I don't know what I'm talking about. You know,
Yeah, it makes it negotiable
yeah.
in the social group.
But every term, every descriptor is that, whether you say tra virgolette or not, right? What is balance? And we'll see. I'm going to show you that one next. I mean, what does it mean to be balanced? Equilibrio is the Italian. I mean, you know, you see, you can't see on this small screen, but when they say it's balanced, everybody's eyes go, what are they talking about? You know, they want to listen especially closely because maybe they'll learn something about what balance is, right? You know, especially what is medium balance, for Pete's sake. You know, and I mean, and then you know, you ask people to fill in the bubble form 1 to 10, you know, and you have to answer, you know, well, this is very balanced, and then you get it's this great stuff. You get, well, the first cup that got a 9, and the second cup that was given a 5. This one, whatever balance is, you know, somewhere between the first and the second, whatever they were, you know, we'll give it a 7. And there, yeah, everybody puts down the 7. I mean, that's how we're working, right? Like the blind leading the blind. But anyway, in this case, they're you know, formally saying tra virgoletto because they know that, first they know that they don't know what they're talking about, and secondly, they know that what it means is what it's going to mean in the local situation. Okay, then here's the equilibrio tape. What I find interesting about this, and I won't necessarily translate it, but what I find really interesting about it, if I can see what's going on, is the person starts giving numbers off. Oh, body, it's a something, and smoothness, it's something else. Sweetness, it's something else. And balance, I haven't a clue what balance is, but it's a 4. It's really great.
Più o meno abbiamo dato gli stessi punteggi, tipo aroma e sede, corposità e risocinque. Equilibrio non ho capito bene che cosa si intende. Senza la spiegazione gli avevo dato 4 di equilibrio, però adesso no. Sì, forse lascerei 4.
Yeah. 4 will do, right? I mean, the requirement is very local. That it's that they give a number, right? And the numbers actually are used as excuses for them to explain their understanding of the taste. So that's another very interesting thing. And it's also something that tasters do. They'll hide behind the numbers as well because they're very afraid that the more important the taster they are, the more they don't want to be caught in a mistake, right? So they'll hide behind the numbers even though they know perfectly well what the subtleties of the flavors are and can talk that way, but they don't want to be the first to talk that way, right? I mean, it's a very interesting phenomenon. But in any case, that words are these empty boxes, like like balance, like light, etc., means that you're trying to understand the coffee with descriptive terms, but what the terms mean stand outside of the situation. And what a person is talking about, Garfinkel says in the next line, the method is recognizable for the everyday necessities of recognizing what a person is talking about, given that he does not say exactly what he means, and in fact, cannot. And Merleau-Ponty in Phenomenology of Perception says that a speaker doesn't know what he means to say. And that is, a speaker, he or she maybe is written out and had some meaning at one time, but they know full well, and you know this every class you teach, once you start explaining something, all the light bulbs go off in the eyes of your students at the most peculiar places. And you discover what sense they're making. And only then do you know how to then explain the next portion. So that every time you teach a class, it's a different class, right? I mean, I've got a class I teach on the sociology of relations, which has both the best evaluation and the worst evaluation of my career. And they're the same lecture notes. You know, it's just the body of students that were in the room in the sense they made, and the local contingencies of those situations, right? So in any case, what happens to how people what happens to these terms and how they gain understandings and the work being involved in understandings is what Garfinkel is sleuthing out. On page, so he proposes on 79 still, where is it? On 79, he says, to answer these questions, that's the last paragraph on that section, it is necessary to detail the work of the documentary method. So at one point, his spying of how someone could come up with an ideal type based on a sample of one to render everything thereafter coherent, which you might also want to look at Garfinkel's essay in this book on good organizational reasons for bad clinic records. That's a real fun one. That is, to detail the work of the documentary method, he got inspired and found a major clue. Wasn't all that he ended up doing, but it played an important role at one point. To this end, a demonstration of the documentary method was designed to exaggerate the features of this method in use and to catch the work of fact production in flight, fact production in quotes. But the important thing for us is to catch the work in flight, because it's only in the course, as a process, as something endlessly emerging and never settled for good, for once and for all. Garfinkel used to say, there's no time out, that this is the work of ethnomethodology. So then we get to the section An Experiment. I hope you got a chance to read that. I mean, if you didn't, make sure you go home and read it. It's fabulous. I mean, it's so amazing that what they did basically was to pre-record answers to 10 questions. They were yes or no answers that came up like one of these 8 balls, you know, and they got students with psychological problems. You never get human subjects permission to do this today. They had the students come up with some questions that were troubling them about whatever problems they had, and they had to formulate them in yes or no answers, and they were told that there was an experimental technique being used where you wouldn't actually see the counselor, that the counselor would be on the other side of the screen, and on the other side of the screen they had someone with a tape recorder who would randomly play the answer is yes, the answer is no, the answer is yes, the answer is no. Just in a random way. And then the other person was making sense of what did the yes mean, what did the no mean, and not only making sense of what the question means, but what the whole diagnosis was behind the answers that was motivating those answers. That is the ideal type for which the answers were documents of. I mean, anyone who's looked at a Chinese fortune cookie, in the restaurant, I mean, how many times do you go, how do they know, or the astrology column? I mean, I have zero belief in astrology, but why do I read the column? I mean,
it makes you the reason to ask yourself the question, and that's the whole point. Yeah.
But sometimes you go, how did they know? I mean, today you would fall in love, right? It only has to happen once to make you a reader of astrology columns the rest of your life, right?
What do you say about the I Ching then?
I've never done it.
Okay.
Yeah. It's probably the astrology column with salt on its tail. But in any case, what's interesting is two things. One, that the subjects reported that they saw directly what the advisor had in mind, and that the pattern that they saw, quote, was perceived from the very beginning. So they immediately had a typification, a pattern, and that was, in many cases, not in every case, a self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay, that's very interesting. They didn't need, 10 questions.
And what is interesting here is that because the answer is random, they re-articulate their next question as a follow on that, following still the same line of ideas of it.
Yeah, except the second amazing part is that sometimes they can't make it fit.
Yeah.
So they have to redo the pattern.
Yeah.
They have to say, and instead of saying this guy's contradictory, or I want another counselor, they go, oh, this analysis is even deeper and more subtle than I thought, right? But they're the ones responsible for those subtleties, right?
I also love the point where one said that, well, the counselor got a deeper insight in what I was.
Yeah. I mean, it's really a remarkable phenomenon, and it's an instantiation of Schutz's orientation toward the prospective and retrospective sense of occurrence. It's only after, at the end, when we find out what everything comes to be, that we then turn around and make sense of all the problems that we couldn't solve, which happens in all our conversations. If we were to stop conversations at our first moment of confusion and ask for clarification, we'd never get the conversation finished, and we wouldn't even see what the person was trying to say. We need to let enough go forth. And then we figure out what the person, we're nodding, right? We're nodding, oh yeah, very interesting. We have a clue what we're nodding to, right? And we go on and on, and finally at the end, oh, that's what it was. And then you act like the nodding was intelligent from the very beginning, and the person never has an idea that really you didn't know what you were doing, when you were agreeing all along.
This was a pretty extreme experiment, and I understand why, but it reminds me of a good coaching situation where you say as little as possible to the student. They want an answer, right?
Yeah.
And you just don't give them the answer, but you give them enough so that they can then build on what they already know. It's usually far more than they think they know.
Yeah, and if they have the agency, they'll have more invested in it.
Yeah.
I mean, the ELISA program was the same kind of thing. ELISA, that's a program which only repeated what was in the question was. So it's asking why did you ask this, and how took something from the last answer and made it a problem, and people went on for hours, and it was just a very simple
that's very
algorithm.
similar to good coding.
I know people. That's the only way they talk.
Yeah, that can be really irritating because when will you engage? When do I
Yeah, it would
get
be
to know you?
irritating, except for the fact that we never even notice it, right?
Yeah, that's a problem. It's a
I
social
think,
problem.
I think there is. I remember Eliza as well from when we were young, but we knew it was a computer.
Well, but it was tested with people who didn't know that, or people actually refused that this cannot be a computer because
Okay.
this person is knowing me so well. I mean, the same kind of
Yeah.
thing.
But what I
Right,
think
right.
is interesting as well, it seems like some of the people felt that something was wrong here in the... And they
There's some,
reacted
yeah.
differently,
Yeah.
somehow.
Yeah.
Because there comes a point maybe where you think, what is this?
This is
What's
not
going on
normal.
here?
Yeah.
You start thinking about
Yeah.
what's going on here.
That's a bit like the other experiments here when people were asking, well, why did you say that? Why? And about 4 lines down.
Yeah,
Oh, for God's sake, drop dead. You know, oh, don't continue.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you crazy?
Yeah.
And then, of course, some questions are more common sense biased to a certain kind of answer. I mean, what this in a way doesn't really consider is that questions are designed to get a certain kind of answer, and this is not reflecting that. So somehow there must be some, and if you get constantly a kind of
Well, this
unmarked
was written
answer, which
for
is
the studies on
yes,
recipient
but I
design.
mean this should, if the phenomenon is there, this should play a certain role here. That in a way, the space you open up is for more a yes or no, and if you get something accidentally, which is always the other one, then you say something's wrong here because I mean whatever I try to formulate it, it's always giving the other one. So there must be something in the local organization of this kind of stuff. But that's CA later then.
The prospective part of it is that you don't demand that things be intelligible at every point. Because you know that the world's not perfect. It's not intelligible all the time. That eventually, and this is Schutz again, things will make sense if I just wait long enough. So you do the waiting. That's the prospective. And then sometimes they end up making sense. Oh, that's what it meant. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you'll forget it completely and it won't be a problem because you won't remember. And that happens a lot, right? You only catch that later on the tape. Oh, I forgot that one, you know. So that's the prospective, and the retrospective is going back and explaining what came before later on, and then much of the time pretending that you knew that from the very beginning.
Again, there's a beautiful parallel to the people working in the design process, because what you learn to do is you learn to cultivate this interaction between prospective and retrospective. Is that you deliberately allow yourself to glean stuff, information, material, whatever, not knowing precisely what it's about, knowing that further down the road you can look back and make sense of it. Oh, that's why we chose that. It takes a certain degree of discipline, but some people can just do it. But it's a kind of like a silent, later untalked about part of educating designers, that they have to get used to this sort of way of
Tolerating
being
indeterminacy.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really well
Yeah.
put. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's interesting because it basically shows that there's a lot more to identify in what's going on in these processes. That it's not really talked about that much. And how do you equip students to deal with that? For example, that's my particular interest. But.
And the other interesting aspect of this is that the way it kept changing, that the coherency was not necessarily stabilized from beginning to end. That in fact it could work fine with a shift and some alteration from each actual exchange.
So the one leads to the next
Yeah.
one, and it's a sequence of temporal presence somehow,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
you make sense of what happened and where you make sense
Yeah.
of where we like to go.
And you're not making the same sense at each stage,
You
and
make
yet it still
maybe
works.
in the current present,
Yeah.
from what
Yeah,
just happened.
yeah. Which you know, I
What you expect to happen.
just love that.
And what you expect to happen.
Yeah. So at the end, it could be that even though there was a new coherency after each question, it's still competent advice at the end of it. So it captures what I like to call the irrationality of affairs. Each answer altered the previous sense of their question to accommodate it. So this again is a documenting search for pattern and a determination of pattern. Then I want to consider with you something that I don't think is well written, but I think is really deep. And I'm trying to figure it out. I'm sort of considering how people, in everything I study, it seems, I'm paying attention in a deeper way than I ever have to how people get caught up in what I'm calling the tendentious immanence of the local affairs. That is, no matter what their interest is or their agenda is, they get their fingers caught up in the local structures, and those local structures take them into places they hadn't anticipated going, and sometimes they forget what their own agenda was. So I'm really interested in these things. So I want to read with you, on page 98, the two paragraphs, the for example and the number 3.
Sorry, which page?
Page 98.
Thank you.
For example, one of the tasks involved in managing rapport consists of managing the stepwise course of the conversation in such a way as to permit the investigator to commit his questions in profitable sequence while retaining some control over the unknown and undesirable directions in which affairs, as a function of the course of the actual exchange, may actually move. He's talking about people doing interviews. Characteristically, the researcher substitutes for a pre-programmed stepwise solution, which you go into the situation with. So you substitute for that pre-programmed stepwise solution a set of ad hoc tactics for adjusting to present opportunity, with these tactics only generally governed by what the investigator would hope to have finally found out by the end of the conversation. Under these circumstances, it is more accurate to talk of investigators acting in fulfillment of their hopes or in avoidance of their fears than of acting in the deliberate and calculated realization of a plan. So here's what I think he's talking about. You go in to an interview, and I did an interview last Thursday of an incredibly competent coffee taster, the head coffee taster for BKI Coffees in Denmark, who also is their main buyer. And I've never met a buyer who does the tasting. I mean, I know buyers who taste, but that you're the chief taster and the chief buyer is a wonderful situation for a coffee company. Anyway, this guy was really good. And I had all these questions, and they just sort of exploded. I had my list of questions, and then it just sort of exploded in front of me. And there were all these interesting things. And I was going off in all directions, but then what directions I was going in ended up being provided by the local contingencies of our talk. That we hit it together some way, and we developed our own common language in some particular way, and our own even value judgments that agreed upon in some particular way. And once all that was in play, I was more a follower than I was a scientific researcher administering a protocol. And that's a good thing. That's because the conversation went well and was interesting. But in situation after situation, we get so absorbed in the local contingencies that we can't see the forest for the trees. And one of my favorite examples of this is when we ask people for directions. I do a lot of traveling, and I'm in places, and I have a hard time in European cities because there's nothing square. In the US, at least, you can retrace your steps. Here, you think you're walking in the opposite direction, and really you're going further away because you've been so turned around in a circle, you don't know which way north is, right? And it doesn't help that they change the name of the streets every block either. So you ask people for directions. Well, first of all, I don't care what country you're in. I used to think it was the problem with Indians that they didn't know anything about maps. But it turns out nobody in Coling knows what maps are either. If I beg them to point where we are on the map, they say, no, you don't need that, you know?
iPhone.
I mean, yeah, there's that too.
It's an interesting phenomenon. I had this in Mexico. People would look at the map and then you could see there's something where you think people should know a map and apparently they don't.
Yeah.
So what is the solution?
Including Coling. I mean, before you can get a useful answer, you have to give a crash tutorial on what maps are and how to use them. I mean, and I've done this in every country of the world, and I'm sick of it already, and so I should start staying home more, you know.
Or record it.
Yeah, that's
very
right.
Interesting.
Yeah. Oh, it is interesting, and you've got an idea there because now I have an iPhone. I can do that recording. I'm going to start doing that. Now I have another project. But what interests me is the following. The guy will say, I'll say, do you know how to get to such and such and such and such? The last bout of inquiries were around finding a dry cleaners, right? You know, they don't know what dry cleaning is in Denmark. I mean, it's amazing. I didn't realize that, but I finally did.
But they know it, but they don't know your word for it.
They don't know my word for it. They think it's a laundromat, okay? And when I describe what it is, they never do it. Anyway, that's another question. They will say, I don't know, but they won't leave it there. Inside, I'm saying, please don't say another word. Please just say, I don't know, and let me be on my way to find someone who can be helpful. No, they feel bad, they like me, they want to help me, they think, oh, maybe I saw that. Yeah, there was one, if you keep going 2 blocks down, I think it's that way, you know, and you're like really, yeah, and sometimes you get hooked into it. More often than not, you get hooked in, oh yeah, and then you turn left or right, oh, you turn left, okay, so I'll go that way, and
they follow you the first 10 steps so you can
and then they're nodding so confidently, yeah, and I'm going, I have a false sense of confidence, right, because they're so confident, yeah, and I know they just told me they don't have a clue, so I'm heading off, they disappear, and all of a sudden, this definiteness of this finger pointing turns into the big blob of downtown Coling, and I struggle, you know, for 20 minutes, and I find my way to a laundromat where I'm not going to put my Emilia Zegna pants in, you know, I mean, just they're not going in that machine.
Ask for Renserie next time. Ask for Renserie next time. They're two different things, the laundromats and Renserie. Okay. Renserie exists, laundromat are...
Okay, well, I'll have to get Coach on that. I found one, by the way. Great place, actually, not very far. They were just closed for 3 days. But what's interesting is how that face-to-face between the person asking directions and the person giving directions has its tendentious imminence where you get hooked into that person's advice even when you know the person doesn't know. And you head off and take deliberate acts based upon such foolishness. And you ask yourself, why did I do it again? You know? And occasionally someone says, I don't know, I'm sorry. And I'll even thank them profusely. I'd say, you are the most original person in Coling. But anyway, so this is, the same thing happens when we interview people for our research, right? The local contingencies of the talk lead us. We're not as in charge as we think we are. Then, okay, I think I've unpacked that paragraph, but
If
three...
you allow them to do that,
What?
if you allow yourself to do that, or
Yeah.
I think what I see is trying to say as well is that the techniques of interviews is a way to keep control where you lose the point, where you don't get what you actually.
And if you think about that, 90 to 95% of all research in pedagogy, social science, social psychology are interview studies.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they even
Scary.
done in a way that the questions are erased. You
Yes.
only have the answers left. So you don't even know where these things
Yes.
come from anymore.
Yes.
Then you really
I know,
thought
it's
about
total BS.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it really is.
it's amazing.
Depressing. But then look at all the anthropological research. How many people went off to the Trobriand Islands and ended up forgetting what brought them there? You know, I mean, they end up researching something completely different, right? And that's not necessarily
That's
a bad
okay.
thing.
That's okay.
Yeah.
But they didn't interview them, at least.
Yeah. Fortunately, because the Trobriand Islanders don't know how to answer a question. They don't know what question and answer is. They have a different discourse system. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, well, I don't know about the Trobriand Islanders, but they're you can ask an Aboriginal person a question, but you won't be getting answers. I mean, they'll just gaze at you. Okay. Whether they know what it means or not. Okay. Number 3. Especially the linguists report this. They go out and do anthropological linguistics, and you're trying to elucidate grammar categories. There's this guy, I think his name was Dixon, who did the Wahlberg. You might spend a year there. It takes you 11 months to teach your informant what the grammatical questions mean, and then your last month he gives you all your answers. But it took him 11 months to figure out what it is you were driving at, you know. And oftentimes anthropological research is based on one good informant who gets you, right? Whereas you know, you've lived with hundreds, but you couldn't get anything from them for the particular questions you had. Okay, number 3 I'm really puzzled by. I mean, it's interesting, but I'm not sure. It frequently occurs that the investigator takes an action, and only upon the actual occurrence of some product of that action do we find him reviewing the accomplished sequences in a retrospective search therein for their decided character. Okay, that I get. Insofar as the decision that was taken is assigned by the work of the retrospective search, the outcome of such situations can be said to occur before the decision. Yeah.
I read to
Somebody help
read it
me.
a couple of times because I don't even get the first sentence.
Yeah, but then you're encouraged by the last sentence. Such situations occur with dramatic frequency. Ratzarak. At the time the journal article is being written. He's saying something like, the solutions are products of this way that the interaction is structured before people know what they mean. That there's somehow resolve that it has to be this, but they don't know what it is. It's like that example I have in my coffee thing that I gave about bold. Let me bring that up for you, because I think that this is pertinent. If I can find it quickly. No. Yes. Okay. The first taster says it's definitely bold. Okay. The second one says it's a very bold coffee. Okay, so they both agree that the coffee's bold. I definitely agree with the boldness. And then they talk some more. Then he says, well, it was really sour, bitter, too strong, but bold, because they've agreed that and confirmed that. Then the interviewer says, what do you mean by bold? That's one of my students. who knows I'm after what these things mean. And the person says, he was the one that said bold. How is bold? That is, what's so amazing is he's the one that said bold in the first, but because it's confirmed, he doesn't know what he means by bold. And the person confirming it, it's a very bold coffee, probably doesn't know what bold means either. So you get this bold agreed upon before anybody knows what it means with.
But in the response, the second does it actually shifts. So asking the first one, what it means is actually somehow framing him into something that it now is changing because he got a response to it from the next one. So.
But who would you say was the one who said bold?
But that's not the point here, is it?
Well, no, he's saying he's the one that said bold.
Yes, but that's my point, that when he says that, the meaning is already on its way of shifting because it got a response from another one.
That is, no one's in charge of the meaning.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the point.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's what's interesting.
Yes.
That somehow the structure leads to the solution. The solution, I mean, people accuse ethnomethodology of being subjectivist.
I would say the interaction instead of the structure.
Yeah.
The interaction of
The interaction.
But there's more in it, because a B in the third turn says, I definitely agree with the boldness.
Yeah.
So to agree means that somebody else, you cannot agree with yourself. That's a kind of strange thing. So, so by saying I agree with the boldness, he puts the authorship to A.
Yeah.
I already at that point.
But at the same time, it might be shifting still.
Oh, because the guy might have said bold, but not really sure.
But he says
But
definitely.
now
Definitely
the A
bold.
then
Definitely is a way to say you're not really sure.
it's definitely bold. Yes, but it's still under negotiation. My guess is that he says, I definitely agree. Definitely again, you go right with the boldness is that he's got somebody to back him up. So it's more reasonable to call it bold because this guy, Henry also thinks it's bold. So now I can be bold and say it's bold, right?
Yeah.
Well, but it's definitely bold is different from saying it's a very bold coffee, because it's definitely bold means it has the feature of being bold, while the other one says it's not only the feature, it's actually a very strong feature.
Yes, so he's backed him up.
Yeah. No, he actually increases and
increases it. Yeah. So the other guy, the first guy, can say, well, okay, it really is bold. No, I'm sure, because this guy has helped me out. It's a negotiation that's going on and it's shifting.
And couldn't the first it's refer to something else than coffee?
Well,
Could
this
it
is.
be the taste or the experience or, the it's?
Well, I think it's exactly the same as we see in the interviews with the questioning with the yes or no with the machine, that you make a new sense with every response that's given. So you cannot go back to the first temple and say it means the same, because it will slightly shift in the next response. That's what I have for me, that even the intention you have with saying something is changing in the response from the other,
So it's wrong
also
to
for yourself.
go back and look what happened actually temporally.
I can see the point. I think you are basically right, but on the other hand, we have instruments in talk to posit authorship and in a way, I mean, you have the whole thing of accounting, and you have. I mean, if you can ask people to account for it, then actually there's an authorship about what you said. Otherwise, you wouldn't ask them, oh yeah, this is interaction, great. But so there's more than...
But if he then says this, it was you who said it, then instead of looking at what did he mean at that time, the way we have to see it is that's a new step, that's a new temporal step.
Well, okay, one interesting thing about this is the interviewer is saying, okay, now, what do you mean, right? And that's not really being faithful to the situation, because the situation is in which the author is anonymous.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a distortion. And what I like several things about this. One is it demonstrates that ethnomethodology is not obsessed with subjectivity. That in fact we're obsessed with objectivity. This object bold exists there in the public space, not as anybody's private property. And then the other thing that I like about this is that they already have an agreed upon account before anybody knows what it is. It doesn't yet have its meaning, but it has a meaning of a sort. That is, it's tending toward a meaning, but it's not done with.
Did they figure out what bold was?
I don't think they got much further than this. I have to go back and listen to this tape. They were really a couple of clueless tasters.
And this is a proof.
But I think that's what he's talking about in this paragraph, in that somehow the outcome of such situations can be said to occur before, if I can figure out what the decision that was taken and who was taking it, and I really have to work with this paragraph. It's
Well, could it also be that it's simply a question of basically making a decision before something's actually happened?
well, the
then
decision is
justify.
made. It's just we don't know what it means, or we don't know what the consequences are until we do more analysis.
The decision to look for some particular phenomenon. You're basically you're circumventing the process.
Well, he says, upon the actual occurrence of some product, there's a product before we know what it means. So you review the product, and you review the sequences leading to the product in your retrospective search for their decided character, and I'm not sure what that means. So, but in any case,
But-
that decision, which I think is a decision by the people in the interaction, but it's a decision that's assigned by the analyst. He says those people somehow decided that it means such and such. I'm not sure.
I mean, the last sentence, if you start with that, I think
Yeah.
it says what you find. I mean, it's in the scientific process, and that's what comes up several times, is that you figure out some things you don't understand, and you go back, and then in a way you get your explanation, and you say, this is not what I actually wanted to do, but I make it as if I did. It's the same kind of thing as the different.
Like tidying up the process.
Yes. Yeah. Make it
Make it look
sensitive,
nice.
or
Make it look as if I knew what I was doing.
Yes.
Yeah. Rather than just engaging a contingent process and sort of
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah.
actually, I only worked out in the middle of the process that this is what it's about.
Yeah.
But where my analysis, whether it comes from this or not, is going is how much of what's vital to affairs takes place by the affairs themselves without so much deliberation going into it. There can be deliberation, but there doesn't have to be.
So what I read here, but also in light of where he comes with the critique of traditional research, is I read this as a critique of what a researcher who didn't allow himself to follow what he saw somehow. That if you don't dare to, let's use the example where you were interviewing the coffee taster. If you don't allow yourself to get rid of your questions and follow then you might end up in the same way of being able to actually write the conclusion before you did the interview, more or less.
Right.
That's how I see.
Yeah.
That's how I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and in a way, as the astronomy things, where in a way the argument goes that it's not objective measurement, and then you get the result. It's you fiddle with the instruments all the time because something it's been raining on the lenses or whatever.
Yeah.
You do things which in a way are not, but you have to take them away.
So the classical example of finding canals on Mars, where it was the intelligence was on the other side of the telescope, as Carl Sagan said when they saw the canals on Mars. It wasn't on Mars, but it was.
Yeah.
So Garfinkel says on a couple of pages previously that knowledge and situations are essentially vague. this notion of essential vagueness is very important to his work.
Number 4 actually explains number 3, I just realised.
Okay,
I think. Doesn't it?
why don't you read it out loud?
No.
Go ahead.
Okay. Prior to his actually having to choose among alternative courses of action on the basis of anticipated consequences, the investigator, for various reasons, is frequently unable to anticipate the consequences of his alternative courses of action and may have to rely upon his actual involvement in order to learn what they might be. Is that not what we've just been discussing?
Instead
It can
of
mean the same thing.
instead of doing the other.
Yeah.
Isn't what we do now to exactly what he describes?
As I understand it, it's again this business of trying to anticipate the consequences of engaging a situation beforehand and not being able to cope with the contingency of the situation and then just let go and then relate to what then actually emerges.
Well, I mean, I think the big point here is that
May have to rely on his actual involvement in order to learn what they might be.
yeah,
rather than
I mean, the
preconce-
learning comes afterwards. The involvement comes
But
first.
you have to, you have to allow yourself to be involved in the situation as it is. But I mean, this again actually is the bracketing thing, isn't it? That you should have a preconceived notion as to what you're going into before you go into it, if you can do that. It's not always easy.
No, I mean, sometimes they'll give you aphasia. But anyway, I wanted to add this notion of essential vagueness, that in most situations people don't know what they mean, and that's not a bad thing. It's a necessary thing. That's how people communicate. Situations are essentially vague and are modified, elaborated, extended, if not indeed created, by the fact and matter being addressed that way. So that's part, I think, of the non-discursive elements. It's where they meet. And so if interaction has this quality, then Garfinkel concludes earlier on the page 38 that shared agreement's not possible. That how can you talk about shared agreement? I mean, he wasn't writing when the rational choice theorists were in the driver's seat, but he writes, various considerations dictate that common understandings cannot possibly consist of a measured amount of shared agreement among persons. The notion that we are dealing with an amount of shared agreement remains essentially incorrect. Why is it incorrect? Because shared agreement means person A knows what they're talking about, and person B knows what they're talking about, and they meet each other, negotiate their opinions, and then have a shared agreement. Well, it's more likely that person A was clueless and person B was clueless, and they came together, and the tendentious immanence of the local contingencies produced the results, the products that he's talking about, and these outcomes are then retrospectively made sense of and used for very good things, like they're modified, elaborated, and even created. That's how the world works. And that's not how most social psychology reads. It is how Proust reads, which is why I prefer Proust. I mean, it's amazing how crazy life gets. And we want to be faithful to that craziness, but then how do we turn all that craziness into something discursive enough that somebody's going to publish it? I mean, that's a constraint that we work on. Anyway, I think I chose this partly because I thought it would be pertinent to the work that you're doing, and also because I think we need to retain and help to survive this notion of documentary meaning. And I think it helps to see where it came from, and it was an idiosyncratic reading and use of it, but I think they're both very deep and I think helpful. So thanks for accompanying me on the voyage.